Welcome to Star-Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii-born Filipino-Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be. Hello, Luminary. It is Leslie Tagorda back again with the first podcast of the year. There are a lot of things that I want to share with you today, but it's a little bit out of the ordinary. So, today's podcast, I'll be sharing a story about grief, love, loss, lessons learned, and of course, connecting the dots, hopefully through some astrology. Some of you might have heard from, if you're friends with me on Facebook, that my mom passed earlier this year. And I want to share the story in today's episode. One, to help me process and reflect, because processing and reflecting heavy emotions is not super easy for this Aquarian. And to share my perspective on a rather taboo subject, and to ponder and open up questions about wounds, wisdom, and triumph or not triumph. And so I hope you listen with me on this episode and share with me your stories on how you process and reflect on grief. And I hope there's something here for you as well. So I'm recording this on January 12th, and it's so interesting how this is 9 days after my mom's passing. And in the Filipino tradition, something that they've gathered from Catholicism, there's a tradition to do a 9-day prayer. Now, I'm not Catholic. My mom wasn't Catholic. In fact, she's Jewish. But I thought that this today would be excuse me, I'm still battling also a little bit of a cold, would be just so wonderful to kind of share this story. So on January 3rd, my mom passed away in less than an hour after I arrived at her bedside in her long-term care home. I rushed from San Francisco back to Hawaii. As you might have heard, I've been going back and forth to Hawaii quite often over the last few years as my mom's health deteriorated. And I was just so lucky to get back this time. And as I got to her care home, my mom was already not responding. And my mom's caretaker had said, speak to my mom, and, she can still hear you, just in terms of like how our body kind of decays. And, the death process isn't just like this one and done kind of process. There's these different layers of dying. And she said that my mom could still hear me. And so thinking about like what could ease my mom into her transition, I decided to play her a song from one of her favorite bands, the Beatles. Of course, my mom is a boomer, born in 1949. And so when the Beatles song Here Comes the Sun came out, that would have been in 1969. She would have been 20 years old, the Abbey Road. And so, of course, it's being there for when my grandmother passed away and my stepdad passed away, all of my primary caretakers. I always recognized that they would go back to their happiest times of their life. For my grandma, her happiest times of her life was when she was a teenager back in the Philippines. And for my mom, I imagine that the happiest times of her life, because at the end, she would often talk about how she used to love surfing on Waikiki Beach in her late teens. And so, at the prime of her youth, she would have been around 20 when Here Comes the Sun came out, living in Honolulu, surfing and working as a waitress at Duke Kahanamoku's club in the international marketplace, kind of in like the height of the heyday of the late 60s and early 70s Honolulu. And so I put my phone speaker up to her ear and I held her hand and I told her that she was now free, that she could go home. There was nothing else that she needed to do, that I loved her, that I forgived her for all the things, that I thanked her, and that she could go away. that she could pass in peace. Now, there are so many things left unsaid, right? Just so many things left unsaid. And literally within like a half an hour of me arriving, she took her final breath. And in so many ways, I've been waiting for this moment most of my life. The time that I knew her, and I she had me when she was 25 years old, and she hurt her back when she was 30. And so most of my living memories, I only knew her life full of pain and mental health problems and opioid addiction, a lot of it because the doctors didn't know how to serve her, a lot of it because she was always looking for that magic pill. But regardless, it really was not easy to be her. And it certainly wasn't easy to be me. And so, as I sit here recording this podcast and processing all that has happened, and for all the things that I had prepared over the last 7 years of, moving my mom out of her home, moving in her into several multiple care homes at the end, finishing up her taxes, getting everything packed and unpacked. I feel like no matter how prepared you are, you can never be prepared for when this moment happens. And for all of the complex emotions, the complicated emotions of the waves of sheer relief that this moment has finally arrived, the sadness and the grief and the regret for a mother-daughter relationship that was far from ideal, the regret of the conversations not able to have, the regret for a life that I'm projecting, but from my perspective here on this earth, a life that was so much wasted, so much potential wasted. Now, I've been so grateful to hear conversations from some of her friends that have popped up on Facebook, from when my mom was younger, or even when my mom wasn't so young, of the memories that they had of her in happier days when she had more freedom to go to the movies, even if she was bound by her motorized wheelchair. And even back in the days where she hosted these like lavish parties with all of her closest friends. But I feel sad for myself because I barely have memories of her before she hurt her back and before she went down this painful spiral. Now, what I heard was that from some of her friends is that she was a party loving young person, right? She moved to Hawaii from Washington State. And before Washington State, she was born in Connecticut as a teenager and quickly fell in love with the sun and the surf of Honolulu in the 60s. In her day, again, she worked at Tsuka Hanamoku's club and served stars who would tip $100 bills in the 60s. But one of the things that I also knew of my mom is that she always dreamed of having a daughter. And I know that in my earliest memories before she hurt herself, how she projected all of the things that she never got as a daughter in me. And maybe that's one of the things that a parent to a child, we are to give our children the things that we never received. And so there, at least, for me, there was never ever anything that I on a physical plane ever desired, right? My mom would shower me with toys and with clothes, even if these things were not my styles, because it was what she wanted for herself. I never had any want. We, would go into like massive amounts of debt because my mom would keep on buying. She had definitely a shopping problem. But I know that it was one of her ways to buy me presents. Everything that I ever needed was one of her ways that she showed me that she loved me. And I can reflect back on that right now, how she was giving me all the things that she needed. And then when she married my stepdad, who raised me, her second dream of having a loyal husband and primary caretaker, she really achieved all of those dreams at a very early age. Now, when she started going down her spiral, though there's so many different things that are wrapped up in there, but yet one of my aunts reminded me to choose happy memories to honor my mom. And I have a really hard time finding all of those happy memories. So, what I want to share with you is the happy memories that are intertwined with lessons. Because, as we know, right, there is no magic pill for happiness, and that joy and happiness doesn't exist on this on this pedestal separated from everything else. Happiness is a state of being. Happiness is intertwined with the lessons learned from hurt, from wounds, from grief, from loss. And so I want to share some lessons that I really learned from my mom, even though it was a relationship far, far, far from ideal. Since this is an astrology podcast, I want to take a step back and ask all of us to kind of look at our moon sign. Right. When I'm working with my clients on the one on one, we spend a lot of time working on the moon sign because the moon sign shows us in our leadership and our work what we need to feel in order to feel successful, in order to do the big and risky, scary things, even if we are scared. But our moon symbolizes those kinds of outward expressions because it runs so deep within us. Our moon sign also connects us to our past, and it connects us to the relationship with our primary caretaker. There are quite a number of astrologers that, in fact, say that our moon sign actually dictates the kind of relationship that we are going to have with our primary caretaker. Almost kind of our soul contract in terms of what our soul needed to learn and to overcome and to excel at, versus the other way around where the primary caretaker has the reins on the relationship. So wherever, if I'm explaining that correctly, forgive me if I'm being a little confused. I'm still having a hard time finding all of my exact words that I want to say. But basically our moon sign creates these patterns in our lives that we learn to navigate and to find our safety and to find our security. And that's why these astrologers, oftentimes, where you can have a set of siblings and they'll have completely different relationships with a parent, even though that parent is indeed that same exact person. And so when I look at my own moon sign, my moon in Sagittarius, conjunct Neptune in my sixth house of daily routines and health, I can see that, if I were to talk about the relationship with my mom on that shadow side with that Neptune there, a mom that was avoidant emotionally, a mom that had a lot of addiction problems, a mom that wasn't always available for me, with that also the Sagittarius. And in that sixth house, oftentimes, people would tell me, well, I would have some chronic illnesses. Well, indeed, it was my mom that lived with chronic pain and chronic mental illness for most of her life. And so maybe with my own astrology, I chose her as my mom because these are the things that I needed to learn and overcome and learn to make my own choices and to rise above to become the person that I am here to be. And for so much, I do really see my mom as my primary teacher, as my mirror, that I can make other decisions. Because you know what? I learned at a very, very, very young age from my mom of how I wanted to be because of how I saw her doing things that I did not want to be. For most of us that have these kind of complicated relationships from our moms, we don't have to run around blaming our moms for, messing up our lives, which my mom had often over and over again as I was growing up apologized to me profusely for messing up my life. But I actually didn't ever see it that way. So let's dive into the lessons that I learned from my mom. Number one, happiness is a choice. I recognize at a very, very, very young age of 5 when my mom first hurt her back and went into this downward spiral of deep depression and pain management through opioids that resulted in addictions, that happiness wasn't something that you could buy or have. Instead, happiness was a choice that you made every single day. I don't think that my mom ever learned that. She sometimes like intellectually said that, but I don't I I can't know what was in my mom's head, but I learned from her that happiness was a choice and that I could make these different decisions. Right. So thank you, mom, for teaching me that happiness is a choice. Because I saw that my mom, at least when I was alive, when she had me, that there was so many parts of my mom where she did not choose happiness. Number two, I learned from my mom how to cook. Okay. Now, I know this is just kind of out of left field rather, but my mom was really known for her cooking. She poured her love into cooking for me, cooking for her family. I know that up until she couldn't cook anymore, she was always had a dinner out for us, one that she poured her love into to fill our bellies. My both my mom and my paternal grandmother were really amazing cooks, and I know you wouldn't really necessarily know this about me, but I am a badass cook. I can roast chickens and turkeys. Definitely we are carnivores in our family, and create rib roasts and just parties filled with food and laughter. And I always tell my son that one of my love languages is cooking. Now, I've been analyzing this cooking and my tendency to overeat with a friend of mine, Monica Bravo, who's actually been helping me with not overeating and disassociating food with love and security. But that's a whole nother story. I'll share that maybe later. But thank you, Mom, for showing me how to cook and how to have fun in the kitchen. Number three, what I learned from my mom was how to play the clarinet. So, my mom had played the clarinet when she was in high school, even in Hawaii, and she played it a little bit into college. But my mom never finished college and she quickly sold her clarinet after high school because she was having too much fun doing other things, no judgments. But in middle school, growing up in Hawaii, we had the choice between playing art and music. Now, I tell this story all the time when I'm in my music education and wearing my musician hat, but I really, really wanted to join art with my friends. But my mom was like, "Nope, you're gonna play the clarinet." And so she brought a clarinet home once in the sixth grade, and she had found me a private teacher before I ever asked, before I even went to middle school. She showed me how to put the clarinet together and a few simple fingerings, and it was so easy and fun that I still play the clarinet. And really, honestly, being a musician, and I'm still a professional musician, has just really been an opportunity of a lifetime for me because I got to travel, I got to go to really good schools. So many doors opened up for me because I was a musician. Now, I don't know if my mom ever thought that I would excel so much in playing the clarinet. Her mom wanted her to play the clarinet because she loved Fiddler in the Roof. And, my maternal grandmother bought me my very first brand new wooden professional clarinet. But before I had that wooden clarinet, my mom knew that I needed a really good clarinet, but we didn't have the funds to go buy a brand new clarinet. So she asked the local music stores if she knew anybody that had a used clarinet for sale. And this was back in the 80s, so like, there was no Craigslist or no like Facebook marketplace to go find a clarinet, and so this was just like all through word of mouth. And I remember her being on the phone and talking to this guy who had this used clarinet, and he was going to meet us at the local shopping mall to meet in person, to meet in a public place in person, so that we could take a look at this clarinet and we would buy this clarinet. But lo and behold, and this had to have been like 1987, 88, or something like that. I remember sitting in the parking lot of this shopping mall, and this older gentleman comes up and he has this clarinet case. And my mom grabs the clarinet case and she looks at it, and there's a cigarette hole, a cigarette burn on the clarinet case. And my mom was like, "Where did you get this clarinet?" And he said, "Oh, I bought it off this pawn shop on Kamki Avenue back in the early 70s." And she's like, "Leslie, this is my old clarinet." And so, of course, we bought that clarinet, and I played it until my grandmother had bought me that brand new clarinet. But wow, talk about full circle. I look back and I remember when we ended up reselling that clarinet. I wanted that clarinet to go on and to help like a new person. But like looking back on it now, we probably should have kept that clarinet with the case that had the cigarette burn. But thank you, Mom, for allowing me to play the clarinet, allowing me to go to music school, even though my dad was like, "She's never going to get a real job playing the clarinet." My dad, in all his Capricorn fashion, always wanted me to have like a really good, stable job. But thank you, Mom, for showing me and the clarinet and making me play the clarinet and how to play the clarinet, because it opened up so many doors for me. The third lesson that I learned from my mom, which is also this is like a double-edged sword, like the cooking part, is a ethic of hard work. So sometime also around middle school, I picked up the habit of working extra hard and doing things overdoing things, taking on too many things on my plate. And around the same time, my mom was having a really, really hard time with her addictions. And I would find her just sitting on the couch playing video games to kind of like numb out her mind. And I just thought this was like the such a waste of time, that my mom would just be sitting there for hours at a time just playing video games. She was probably like having whatever painkillers that she had, and when she wasn't with her painkillers or her video games, I just never knew which mom I would get. Like she would have just like these outbursts of like rage. But as long as I was in my room practicing, I could avoid all of my mom's outbursts, because, as a middle schooler, I mean, I was really nerdy. I wasn't like out on the streets, like, smoking pot like some of the other kids in my neighborhood. I was like diligently just like in my room practicing, because if I was in my room practicing my skills, like literally like 3 hours a day, I knew I would be okay, because I could escape. My hard work was an escape. And I look at this today, and my need to overdo and my need to work hard and put in all of those hours, although I'm slowly healing from that, was really just an escape mechanism. But I'm glad that I learned a hard work ethic. And sometimes I not only was it an escape ethic, I think that sometimes like there was like this karmic debt that I was trying to pay off, that, well, if my mom wasn't going to be working, I would have to work twice as hard for both of us. So I did learn some hard work ethic from my mom. So thank you. I'm unlearning some of those from my place of privilege, but thank you. Thank you. Um, Another lesson I learned from my mom was the consequences of choices. Now, my mom's end of life was just really tragic. She spent the last 2 years since December of 2020 um, not moving in this one single care home. My mom had been kind of kicked out of five different care homes before she landed in this last foster home where she didn't move for 2 years, like literally didn't move from her place in bed, didn't move positions, even though her caretakers tried to move her to, prevent bed sores and things like that. And she was always looking for that magic pill that made all the pain and suffering go away. She would pay for physical therapy and then they would cancel the physical therapy because she wouldn't be making progress. She would be calling different therapists and, burning bridges. She didn't have a relationship with her family, her sister or her brother because of all of these bad choices, even her best friend. And when I remember on my baby shower, my mom and her best friend had this terrible falling out, this terrible, terrible falling out. And she had made her final trip outside of Hawaii to come to my baby shower 7 years ago, and she was going to go with her best friend. And I don't know what happened that night. Neither of them would tell me, but I'd went on to see her best friend, and her best friend had known that she wasn't doing very well. And I told my mom, hey, you should really reach out to your best friend because I don't think she's going to be around too much longer. And my mom she wouldn't reach out. She just wouldn't do it. She had to have that. She had to be right in that relationship. And so ultimately, all of these different choices, right, in her interpersonal relationships, in her own health, were always the ultimate bypass. Where, from my perspective, that she didn't really ever do any real healing. She was always looking for something to take her pain away instead of moving through them. So, thanks to her lessons of always doing those bypass, I have made so many more different choices in my life to make choices, to do the hard things. I'm still learning. It's like not any of these things have I perfected in any means, but I know that I need to have difficult conversations. I need to do the emotional heavy lifting of healing. I need to take care of my body. I need to do the hard work and face my fears because of these consequences of choices. Now, also these choices, because I was a single child and my dad had passed and she had burned the bridges with her family members, all of these choices now were put on me at the end of life. And so some of these choices she did not like, some of these choices that I ended up making for her. But there were a lot of these choices that we didn't end up having other choices. And so now, today, I know that I have to plan and prepare and do the hard things for the inevitable, because if I don't make these choices, the choices will be made for me. So thank you for mom for teaching me that I have a choice and that there are consequences of all of my little choices. The next lesson that I learned from my mom is that abundance is a mindset. Now, my mom grew up very, very middle class. And as we got older and she married my father, we never had a need. We came from middle class privilege, and my mom had so much. Even in her dying days, I am so absolutely grateful that we always had the income that my mom could pay for her very, very expensive care out of pocket. And yet, growing up, my mom never felt rich. And this always baffled me because I always heard these stories about, like, we're not rich, we don't have enough. Yet, my mom had a massive, like, shopping problem. She loved Christmas, as probably because she grew up Jewish and didn't have a Christmas tree. So in the height of everything, I remember our little 2-bedroom townhouse. We had like 7 Christmas trees that were like decked to the nines. And she would spend thousands and thousands of dollars at Hallmark and like all these like little Christmas villages. And it was like all too much for me. Like for me, like my rebellion was to go absolutely the other way. But I never really understood why my mom didn't feel that she was rich when she had everything she needed, from designer bags and designer purses and designer shoes, to a beautiful roof over her head. We always had food. We always had what we needed. And I was like, you know what? Just like that idea of happiness, abundance is a choice. It's a mindset to be appreciative and to feel grateful for every blessing that we have. Again, we came from this place of privilege. I recognize this privilege and I'm so grateful for this privilege. And I wish my mom had seen how much she truly had. But I know. I am so grateful every single day for all of the abundance that I have. And lastly, even though my mom's style and taste, we didn't always agree, I recognize that my my appreciation for fine things comes directly from my mom. Our house was always beautiful and organized, and everything always was in its place. And I have that from her. I inherited that from her, my timeless style and my appreciation of fine things. So thank you, Mom. Now, there are still things that I'm really, really learning. I'm still learning that I don't have to go through it alone. Now, for much of this grieving process, I have chosen to be by myself. I traveled to Hawaii. I left my husband and my son at home so I could do some big things. And I am so grateful for all of my family members in Hawaii that kept on consistently reaching out, and my friends reaching out, asking me if I wanted company and meeting me for lunches and for dinner, but allowing me to have my space to grieve. I'm still learning. I'm still doing so many things on my own, and I'm still learning to reach out and to ask for help. And the biggest thing that I am learning right now and unraveling is that part of when I talked about happiness is a choice, that the lesson that I'm learning is that to have joy and connection means that you have to have conflict and challenge. And like my mom, I can definitely be an avoider, cutting off experiences and people when I don't want to face a conflict. And quite frankly, not everybody in my life that I've come across do I want to have a relationship with. Like there's sometimes I just don't want to have a relationship or to have a conflict, and I recognize this. Okay, but when it comes to the people that are the most important in my life, like my son and my husband, I recognize I still have a lot of work to do. I still have a lot of work to do with my son, and that has come so full circle. Right, like as now my primary caretakers have all passed, how can I be a healthy caretaker for my son to not recreate the harmful relationships that I had, instead to clear the slate and to create a stronger bond of reconnection, a bond that is kind, a bond that is not hidden in anger, and to really rebuild these new patterns. You know, I look at his little Virgo moon and I can be super critical with my son. And I know that my son does not need critique. And so I'm sorry, Rocket, for if how I might harm you, and knowing that I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. So, thank you for listening to me go on and on and on about these lessons that I've learned from my mom. But now, as we move into this kind of astrology and leadership, like kind of doing these deep and inner healings, I'm really opening up to these questions of, you know, earlier last year when I was working with Nadia Aarons and we were doing that project, Chiron on midlife awakening, this is really a giant question that I hope that I can reveal. And as I pursue this question, that I can teach others, because there's these really big questions that as I look at my mom and her upbringing, how I've seen her as a victim and blaming everyone in her life, just kind of the relationships that she's had with her closest people and how all the bridges that she has burned, about how does one end up stuck in this victimhood and this blame game, right? So bringing up these larger questions in leadership, what is it about someone that rises above all of their challenges and all of their trauma? There's so many stories and so many memoirs of people who have endured horrible, horrific things in their lives that rise above and do great, impactful things in the world. And yet, with all of the privilege and all of the resources available to somebody like my mom, what is it about someone's, is it nature, is it nurture, is it choice, is it circumstance? What is it in our lives that allow us to rise above? Now, maybe I'm not supposed to know, right? Maybe it was my mom's soul contract to learn pain, to learn hardship, to learn isolation, to learn addiction. I don't know. Maybe that's it. When I look at her natal chart, she had this beautiful Libra moon conjunct a Mercury retrograde and Neptune in the 11th house. I know that my mom was very, very, very spiritual. And all of this against her South Node, right? All of this with her South Node. And I look at her rising sign, her Scorpio rising sign, so magnetic. Yet maybe she never learned to trust herself. She had Venus right on her rising sign, Scorpio Venus. She was magnetic. People were drawn to her, yet she never loved or saw her own beauty, right? And then her moon sign, her Pisces moon in the fourth house. I know that her feelings were larger than life. And I know that maybe it was just the sign of times that her parents did not or could not or did not know how to allow her to explore all of those feelings. She had this moon Saturn opposition, and I know those moon Saturn oppositions, I've seen this signature in people's charts. Sometimes this can be a very strict upbringing. I don't know what my mom's childhood was like. She talked about her dad being very strict with her. I don't know what that relationship was like, right? But I look at this chart and I see a lot of conflict. I see a lot of creativity. And if my mom had been my client at that time, I would have asked her to be able to channel her rage into her creativity. I think that's why her Christmas were so over the top. She had so much creativity. She definitely was an artist, and I don't think she knew that she could have a life as an artist, and that sometimes with great artistry comes so much pain. What could my mom have done if she didn't get sucked into that downward spiral? But she leaves so much with me. She's still my teacher, bringing up these giant questions that I hope to be able to learn to answer through astrology and spirituality in this lifetime. I know that my soul chose my mom in this lifetime. I can see it when I look at our composite charts with our north nodes and our south nodes. We were supposed to learn pain from each other. I don't think that I know that my mom loved me unconditionally, and maybe I haven't been a good daughter. I always think about those things. Have I been a good daughter? Sharing my mom's most without consent. How could she have given me consent to share these most intimate stories about her? But I'm sharing them anyway because there's so much learning to be done from them. I can see that in our composite chart that her north node and my Chiron are conjunct. I can see that her natal Chiron and my moon are conjunct. This definitely was a painful relationship in many, many ways, but I'm grateful for all of those learning lessons because I'm here learning from them today, and they have made me who I am today. So thank you, Mom, for our souls choosing each other in this lifetime. I hope that I have learned the lessons that I need to learn in this lifetime because I don't want this kind of pain in a future lifetime. I hope that now that my mom has passed, that she has finally found the peace and happiness that she wasn't able to find in this lifetime. So I hope that these learning lessons, that maybe you have found something for you in these lessons. You know, may the song by the Beatles, Here Comes the Sun, show us that every single day the sun will rise again. That every single day, we have a new choice to hold the light, to see the light, to radiate the light. All right, my friends, thank you for listening and allowing me to share this vulnerable story. Please don't judge me. This is my own perspective, and more soon. I don't know when I'll be back. I hadn't planned on coming back again in divine timing. My schedule, I guess I had known for a while that I would have needed this time. My spring schedule is purposefully set up to be very spacious to help me process all of this. We start star powered on the 23rd with this bright new moon that will illuminate so many new things for us in 2023. So if you haven't yet started your 2023 with all your goals, do not worry, all in divine timing. You are in exactly the right place. So for me right now, I will learn to be okay with doing nothing at this moment. And thank you for allowing me to share this story with you. All right, my friends, until next time. As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.